Hi guys, and welcome back to the Bikes and Aces channel for the second instalment of the podcast mini-series. Now, this week I'm going to be sharing with you the chat that I had with a very wonderful gentleman called Kevin Munt, who runs a very brand new podcast called Aid Station, which is all about ultra running. So if you are an ultra runner, then do come and check out his podcast, and do come and check out the chat as well and find out a little bit more about it. Okay, so we're here today to chat about your podcast, Aid Station. But first, before we get into that, could you just tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name's Kevin Munt. I'm 63 years old. I've been running and cycling on and off most of my life. I started racing bikes as a junior when I was 14. And then sort of drifted out of that, did a lot of different sports, including rugby. Then went in and out of doing silly things like a good friend of mine would phone up, when I was in my 20s, 30s and say, oh, we're going to do a half marathon in about 6 weeks' time. And then I'd go and run them with very little training and certainly no taper and no idea of what I was doing really, except just going out and putting in a few miles. And I think it's the sort of thing you can get away with when you're that age. I was never a serious runner and certainly never in a running club until later in life, when I guess you get to that sort of midlife crisis period. And then when I was about 47, I actually joined a running club, having run another one of these daft half marathons and I couldn't walk down the stairs after it. I decided I might join a club and have a bit more structure about what I do, and it's the best thing I've ever done. So it all went from there really, and I got involved with the club, and then the club had needs for coaching. The club only had one coach at the time, so I then did England Athletics coaching qualification. I'm a qualified athletics coach, and have carried on with that in terms of professional development and going on EA courses and gaining all the info I can really. And then one thing led to another. I did a few marathons. I've tried most things. I've done long distance triathlon and got a bit fed up with, I didn't really enjoy the marathon as a discipline really, to be honest, and it didn't really agree with me. So I started running a lot more off-road on trail and then increased the distances like that. So hence I now consider myself an ultra runner.
It's a wonderful world to get into, the world of ultra running. I'm not quite there myself, but I know quite a few ultra runners, and just hearing them talk about it is phenomenal. So yeah, I've got plans to get there one day. Just kind of one step at a time for me. So let's have a little chat about your podcast. So obviously you've got the podcast called Aid Station. It's a couple of episodes in and I've listened to them and I think they're amazing. It's a really, really good podcast. But can you just just roughly summarize your podcast? What is your podcast all about?
Well, it's all about giving information, help, support, as in an aid station. For those that don't know, an aid station is something that you find on an ultra running route normally. And there's normally a number of them depending on the distance, where volunteers who are normally ultra runners and know all about what the needs of the ultra runner are, supply you with food, water, even other types of help like blister treatment or even a bit of massage or cramp relief or something like that if you need it. They'll do anything to help you get through the race, basically. So I've taken that format and sort of tried to do it as a listening experience, if you like, in providing help and support to ultra runners, mainly in the mid to back pack. This is because there are a heck of a lot of information out there that comes from the front of the race and comes from experienced coaches who are coaching top athletes. I found this through endurance running in athletics as well. And sometimes this information, although we all have the same bodies, we don't all have the same genetics. And some of this information isn't relative to those of us that run slower or get older, like myself, and run more mid or back of pack. And there are a lot of podcasts out there in ultra running that talk to the front end, the sharp end of races. And these are great. I mean, they're inspirational interviews, there's no doubt about that. But I just thought there was a bit more of a gap in the market for some coaching advice around mid to backpackers, and for those who want to get into ultra running as well, of course, and make that step up. Maybe they've done their first marathon and want to go that extra 4 miles actually. Most ultras start around about 30 miles. I mean, anything over 26.2 is actually an ultra marathon, but most of them start at 30 miles or 50k.
Well, there we go. So by that standard, I've actually done an ultra, because my marathon ended up being about a mile longer than it should have been, because I got lost and had to take a detour somewhere. So there we go. I've already breached that threshold, really, haven't I?
You've already run one, yes.
But,
yeah. The style of the podcast, I really thought, because again, they tend to be interview based. I'm not saying that mine won't have interviews in it, but they tend to be quite long and just straightforward interviews. And I thought I'd mixed it up a bit and make it magazine style. So you're getting things like tips and news and advice on kit that's sort of more like you would read in a magazine, if you like. You know, when you go through them, there's all this other stuff. If you read running or cycling magazines, they're all broken up with lots and lots of different types of information. So that's really where I was coming from with it, and hope to continue that format.
Yeah, and that's a really nice way to kind of have them, because they are like nice little short blocks that you can kind of piece together and listen to, rather than just the one really long interview. So you've spoken a little bit about, obviously, that kind of gap between the front of the pack runners and kind of the more mid to back of the pack runners. So would you say that was your initial inspiration behind the podcast?
Yes, yeah, that's really what it's about. It's about for people who run around me or behind me, if there are any. And I think there's a lot of information that those runners carry around with them as well, that doesn't get shared, because people always talk to the people at the front. And you got to remember that, you know, if you run a 100-mile ultra marathon, and I'm not saying people are going to do that straight, but just take the longest end, the top guys are finishing those in somewhere around 13, 14, 15 hours. And the slower ones are trying to beat the cutoff time of maybe 28 or 30 hours. So they're out there nearly twice as long. And they have if anything, they're better endurance runners because they spend longer out there. I mean, they may spend longer time walking or speed walking, but those are all things that are relevant, and that, you know, needs to be considered, that you spend longer on your feet, you're in your kit longer, and all the other things that go along with that, that stress that goes along with completing one if you're at the back of the field. So that's really where I wanted to share that sort of information and help that with that. And there, of course, there's a wealth of information amongst those people to share.
Brilliant. So have you kind of got any main goals going forward for the podcast? Have you got anything that you really want to achieve or kind of target? Share a little bit about that.
Well, really, getting more people into ultra running, and I don't know that I have to do much on that front because it's growing so fast. I mean, it's unbelievable now. The races sell out in 24 hours and, you know, stuff that never used to happen. I mean, ultra running really was just for the hardcore who could they were fell runners, mountain runners, orienteers, people who could read a map. And now it's become much more available, if you like, through some, good race direction and race directors putting together events where people are well supported, trails are quite well marked, and you can find your way around. And obviously you can progress on from those and go to extreme stuff where you're out in the middle of the jungle with no GPS and just a map, depends where you want to take it to. But in terms of getting into the sport, it's much easier to get into now. And in some ways it's got a little bit more trendy, if you like. I think there's a younger appeal to it. So in terms of where I want to go with the podcast, it's I want to encourage people to come into the sport and do more with it, but to have fun with it as well. But I'm not trying to monetize it or make money off of it or grow it in that way. It's just a sharing thing. I mean, I've been around too long. I'm too long in the tooth to be bothered with that. I'm semi-retired. And so if I can pass on some of my experiences through it or coaching experience, and that I'd be happy with that. I'm certainly not looking at, number of downloads and all this thing all the time. I fully understand there are people out there that want to make money out of their podcasting. And why not? It's another artistic medium, if you like, that people can do to earn a living or even help fund the sport that they're doing or the hobby that they're doing.
Amazing. So my next question is a bit more of a tricky one, actually, because it is, have you got a favourite episode? But obviously you are only kind of 2 episodes in. So have you kind of got any more recordings in the pipeline? And if so, have you got an upcoming favourite episode or kind of a favourite one that you could share a little bit about?
Well, I don't have, obviously with only 2 episodes, it's a bit unfair to say I've got a favourite one. And the first one was all about me, so which isn't the greatest way.
It's a bit more of a tricky question, that one, but
it's fair enough question. I mean, my plans for the future are to do more interviews on the run, so that they're not studio based. I only want to do face-to-face interviews, so I don't want to do anything over Zoom or Skype or anything like that, because I think you just get a better feel, you get more out of the person in the interview, and I have found by getting the right piece of kit that the on the run interviews aren't too bad from an audio perspective if you can put up with all the sniffing and heavy breathing that goes along with them. And I think ultra runners understand that, so it's almost like helps. And many of them so far that I've gathered with the 2 episodes I've done, that they listen to the podcast while on the run anyway. So I've had comments saying that we felt like we were out there running with you on the second episode I did with Lizzie Gatherer. People thought they were running along with us when they were running on their runs. So I think that's a format that I'll use in the future. In terms of favourites, I'm going to probably do an episodic version of a personal project. I'm going to try and attempt to run the length of Wales in an event called the Dragon's Back Race in September. Okay. So I'm going to do separate episodes just on that, on a project basis. So I guess for me, that'll be my favourites. It probably won't be everybody else's. But those are the future places I want to go to with that side of it. And I hope to obviously interview other people, even in events, if they'll put up with it. Because you spend a lot of time, you can spend 6, 7, 10, 12 hours running along on your own. So most people are quite happy to chat anyway to pass the time. So I think there'll be a lot of that more in race stuff and things like race reviews, so that people newer to the sport can also hear about the events. And I also want to do an episode on jargon busting, just, so that, because there's a lot of stuff out there that people will go, what does that mean? You know, when you come into any new sport, there's always a jargon around it that you feel a little bit on the outside of the sport because you don't know what they're talking about, but you don't want to appear like an idiot because you don't know what they're talking about. So I hope to do something on that as well.
Oh, that sounds amazing. That sounds like there's some really, really good stuff coming up, and I'm certainly looking forward to hearing more about it. So I'm going to go into the last one now. So where can people find your podcast, and anywhere else that they might be able to look to get some tips and advice from you?
Well, they can get, obviously by all the big players, it's on all the main podcast libraries. So that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, any of their favorite libraries, they'll probably find it. I'm pretty sure it's there. Also www.aidstation.co.uk, and you can get it direct there from the website, links to the episodes. There's also a Facebook group now. If you go onto Facebook and look up Aid Station Ultra Running Community, that's Aid Station Ultra Running Community. You're welcome to come along there if you want to get into ultra, you're into ultra, or want to learn more about it, or just partake in a community group. I've set up a community page on there to get people interested as well. And via that, if you want to get tips or help or get into ultra or ask me things personally, you can certainly ask questions on there, and I can give you any feedback or help that you may need with it.
Perfect, that's amazing. So I'll be able to pop all those links in the description below the video so that people can go and check them out. So
thanks very much.
Yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up the chat, actually. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do, then drop a comment down below and let us know what you thought. And make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and hit that subscribe button to keep up to date. If you want to check out the links mentioned in the video, then do head down to the description below where you will find them all there. Speak to you later.